Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome out to Cabinet on 30th of July. Good to see you all on a very warm night. We have got a fairly chunky agenda to get through tonight, so we will crack on. Apologies. We've had apologies from Councillors Richard Holland and Councillor Andy Smith, and Councillor Rob Strachan is joining us very, very shortly, we are assured. First item on the agenda is DFGs, but before we go there, we'll do declarations of interest. Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, the DFG is just a review. We're not making any decisions, but I will declare an interest as the chairman of LWMTS. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to Councillor Farrell, I'm not the chairman, but I am a director on LWMTS as well. So for item 3, please.
Great, thank you. Kerry, surprises?
Finally, the same interest as a director of LWM for the DFG item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any more? No. Okay, brilliant. As ever, if interests arise during the course of discussion, please do interrupt and declare that at the earliest possible opportunity. Alex, over to you for the review of DFGs.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, this is a genuinely exciting review of year one of LWMTS taking over the running of disabled facilities grants. A bit of background, we took over in April 2023 from the previous supplier. It's fair to say that things weren't going particularly well for that supplier, and it was the decision of us as the council that taking it on board in our wholly owned company was the best decision, as this report clearly states out. So this is a review of year one, so from the 1st of April 2023 for a full 12 months. It talks about loads of good stuff that's all in the report, including some lovely case studies as well. A few highlights really to report. When the service was transferred to us in April 2023, 55% of customers had received no input from Millbrook, who were the previous supplier. Over the past 12 months, the team have reduced this to 0. So from 55% to 0, I mean, that in itself is a fantastic achievement. 100% of customers have received contact now in relation to their case. 7% of customers, just 7%, had a grant awarded. That's now been increased to 23%, and that's at time of writing of this report. It's improved even more since this report as well. And a further 54% have received an occupational therapy assessment, which is allowing their case to progress positively. It's a really, really good news report. Some other good bits of news. Referral to grant approval is now 112.6 working days, and that's a 63.9% improvement on the previous supplier's timescale. And referral to adaptation completion is up 48.1%. There's some great stats and figures in here. Please do look at the case studies, and I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Great, really positive. Thanks, Alex. Janice, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. When I was reading some of the information in here, I just thought what a phenomenal improvement in the time frame that's been done. And a couple of the figures that you quoted there as well, the 63.9% for the referral to grant approval, 48.1% referral to completion, I think is wonderful progress for those people who are benefiting from it. But what was even more impactful for me out of this particular report were the case studies that shows the quantifiable benefit of what it is that's being done and the improvement and the quality of life that it's actually having for those people who are benefiting. My only question that I've seen that I'd just like a bit more context on, if you could, is on the role of Bromford. So on page 22, we've got reference to there to supporting Bromford. And I'm just wondering, with the pace that some of those the grants being approved and the adaptations taking place and the pace that's being done now, is that something that is being impacted by Bromford? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And you make a really good point. I mean, a DFG funds an adaptation to someone's property, which it can be a small adaptation, it could be a big one, but it means the world to these people. These are people that maybe struggle to get around the house, struggle to maybe get in the front door, in the shower, those kind of things, get into the bed, and the work the team's doing to make sure that they get their adaptations, but also get them swiftly, is phenomenal, really. I think it's a good point about Bromford. You know, Bromford are our biggest social housing provider in Lichfield District, and we have been working closely with them. I'd like to see relations with Bromford improve in general. I think there are some good case studies, but there are also some that could be improved. The team look at the best use of stock considerations. So, you know, for places like Bromford and for some of our other housing providers, you know, the process is effectively the same. But what we have to do is obviously work with Bromford being one of their properties. And I'd just like to see maybe Bromford move sometimes a little bit quicker, be a little bit more agile of foot when it comes to these things, because I think sometimes you can be tied up in layers of bureaucracy that we can bypass as a council, but going to people like Bromford and other providers, there's often another layer of bureaucracy there. I think the working relationship is good, but you know, as always, could be improved. But I think it's good news, and certainly as a stark contrast to what was happening pre-April 2023, the relationships have definitely got better.
Thank you. Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, Alex, please. Section 1.5 makes reference to overview and scrutiny. I just wondered if you'd had any feedback so far on the meeting last week when they looked at this for you. And the second question, some fantastic improvements there, as we've just seen, to the statistics. I'm just wondering a little bit of background as to how you've achieved that in such a quick space of time.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Well, the first point, thankfully, the ONS committee were very complimentary about this report, as they should be. I think it's very positive. So yeah, some really positive points that came out of that. Some interesting questions were raised, but all in all, a very good positive response to it, which I was very pleased about. And how it was achieved, I think it's basically fundamentally the job was being done right. It's being headed up by James Knott and his team, and they are fantastic at what they do. So when they came on board, their first job was to get through the backlog, and there's a giant backlog of cases. So they've implemented a new system to get through the backlog quicker. They are acting in the way that they respond to these cases and the inquiries. They're communicating a lot better than the previous company, so we're getting back to people quicker. We are making solid decisions and doing things in an efficient way. But effectively, it's being run as a business, is the way I'd describe it. And James and his team work incredibly hard to make that the case. The other supplier before, amongst their many issues, I think, was that they were dealing with so many different councils and so many different cases, and their systems were antiquated and they were slow, and they didn't really have the get up and go that James and his team do. So really, it's difficult to pinpoint a golden bullet, because I don't think they have done that. They've just behaved in the way they should do. They've treated these cases seriously, and also realised that the people involved that are applying for these DFGs are people that desperately need them. You know, it's a statutory right for these people to have these adaptations done, and they should have them done effectively and efficiently. And that's just what the team have done, using a combination of good systems, effective workflow, and just taking the ball by the horns, really. And it's only getting better. And I look forward to the next report where things are just going to improve more and more.
Yeah, thank you, Alex.
Okay, thank you. Any more, Richard?
I think it's more of a comment, really, and in saying that it is pleasing to see what's before us. I think from the previous setup, we knew there were issues, and the issues, I don't think, were going away. They were probably mounting, so we were never going to get really underneath it. And as Alex has just said, it was probably due to the number of authorities, the number of housing associations and so forth, that just was that mountain of complexity. And certainly you don't get through a backlog, you only add to a backlog. And certainly I think what we've inherited from it with the the setup here is that we've been able to, what I think is quite important for this district and our residents, is that we've been able to concentrate on them in the first instance, and that's what this is all about. It's that concentration of providing a service for our residents, whether it comes from the Lacto or the Lichfield District Council. We look at it very much provision for our residents, and I welcome it. Certainly the ones I've been made aware of, complimentary all the way, from beginning to end, where before it was when, and now we're getting things done. So these are good results. So may it keep. And obviously never to be on our rest on our laurels. There's still work to be done, as always in this field, and to maintain it and improve it. But well done.
Alex?
Yeah, we're going to say, I mean, James and the team, they're certainly not laurel resters, and they will keep going. And just to add to what you've just said there, Councillor Cox, the approach from the team for DFGs is definitely a person-centered approach. And I think some organisations could look at people applying for grants as just numbers on a list, and the team certainly don't do that. They understand they're people that have needs, some of them urgent needs, and I think that's what makes the team strive on to always be better and be quicker and more effective in the ways that they work. So thank you for your comments.
Councillor Strachan.
Thank you, Leader. Sorry that I was slightly late this evening. Alex, this is a superb report, and it's really heartening to see that taking this in-house has worked so well and is really starting to deliver some of the outcomes that we aspired to have with external providers and that we're now able to deliver via ourselves and LWMTS. I was particularly struck, and it's within the presentation part of the papers on the looking ahead and opportunities, because of course the last time we met, we set up the new procurement framework, which has an incredibly high ceiling and feels like it equips us well as a council to take those next steps in rolling this out, certainly across this council and possibly wider. Could you briefly give us some of your ambitions as to how this service can be developed going forwards? Because the foundations are now brilliant. Where do we go next?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. I think the first step in this journey after taking over what wasn't a very good record, if I put it politely, was to get our own house in order, and that's what the team did firstly. Moving forwards, they have now got the capability, the know-how, the systems to roll that out to other councils should they wish to take on our services. And I think that the report that you mentioned that was put through a few months ago basically sets out our ambition to take the team and everything that they do well and take that as a case to other people, because there are lots of councils that found themselves in the situation we were in with a provider who was providing a poor service, and there are still people looking for that company to take them to the stage that we're at now. So I'm hoping that through Lichfield West Midland Traders Services, the wholly owned company by the council, so all the the dividends that go back into Lichfield District Council, we can achieve two things: one, a much better service for councils, and two, more reward for us as a council, so that we can better give services to our residents here in Lichfield District. So I think it's only positive ahead of the opportunities that we could do with this DFG service, and it's not just a short-term gain either. I'm hoping that we can add 1, 2, 3 councils in the future, and then basically show others that we can do it really well, and hopefully people will be banging our door down for these services.
Sorry, a supplementary on that one. So we've given you the procurement framework with which to do this, but the key limitation of that is going to be resource. How do you intend to address that?
Yeah, I mean the beauty about DFGs is that once the system has been set up and run effectively, the team itself doesn't necessarily need to expand very much. The way that we're doing things as well, which makes things a lot easier, is we've got the ability to use providers in our areas or in the areas that we would be going to. So instead of contracting one supplier that might be charging us a high rate and they go all over the country, we can actually use local contractors to get this work done. So actually there isn't a big pull on resource, and with the right systems in place, which James and the team have now done, the possibilities are endless, to be honest, and don't really impact resource as it goes up in a kind of exponential way.
Great, thank you. I think we've done that one. I think probably just worth pointing out that the sorry state of affairs with delivery of DFGs was not a position unique to Lichfield District Council, and indeed it is the bane of many local authorities up and down the country. So I think hopefully we will be able to get some interest from other local authorities in how we're doing and delivering for our residents, as Councillor Cox says. Do you want to move your recommendations then, Alex?
Well, yes, but I believe it's gone off my screen now, but I think it's just to note the review, unless you can tell me otherwise.
No, that is exactly what it is. To note
Very
the
good.
performance to date and future direction of travel and priorities.
I agree.
Noted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And perhaps you can pass our thanks from Cabinet on to James Knott and his team as well. Great. Next item on the agenda then. Over to you, Rob, for Money Matters 2023-2024.
Thank you very much, Leader. This is the 12-month report for the most recent financial year, and so this is the benchmark from which we start to build the next medium-term financial strategy from. But more on that later in the meeting. I can report that we used slightly more general reserves than we expected to over the last 12 months, but that was really a minimal amount. We used £184,409, so slight 34 and a bit thousand more than we expected to, but that was largely manageable within the wider budget. The main challenges that we met in the last 12 months really were adverse variances on addressing homelessness, on using agency staff within the Joint Waste Service, and particularly vehicles, and a slightly lower than budgeted planned income. And so applying those issues, tackling homelessness is something that I think we all want to deal with and all want to address very quickly. And there is almost no adverse inference from committing further spend to that, because it's something that we must do. The pressures in joint waste, I think, are born of the nature of the service and how it is operated, and so will always be there. And the lower than budgeted planning income is I would hope, a short-term economic blip, largely due to the macroeconomic factors. We have, however, seen favourable variances within car parking income, and we've been able to use some of the contingency budget, and the higher interest rates have had the benefit that they've brought us slightly better than forecast treasury management income. We will obviously be factoring those in the development of the next MTFS. One key concern, and I'm aware that officers have it in hand, is the adverse variance in leisure centre income. And I'm reassured that efforts are being made to address this, and that it does have a route in one leisure centre that is to be phased out and replaced by a better and far more efficient model in the fullness of time. But that adverse variance is £425,000 in the 12 months coming to this point. It has been addressed so far with the reserve that we have for those adverse variances. It was a product of our exiting the previous contract, but that will not last forever. And so efforts will still need to be made. And I can reassure you that 46% of that reserve is still available. LWMTS did make a small profit, and so they have paid us a small amount. And we have slightly increased the earmarked reserves. That's largely because of the fact that we've set aside money within those earmarked reserves to build on the capital projects that we have approved. But you will see that because they're not moving forwards within the previous financial year, we've had to slip that capital programme. So there's £7 million worth of spend that's slipping from last year to this. But now that I can see that things are on the move, I expect that they will be deployed within the next financial year. We've had slightly lower than forecast capital receipts. Again, that is largely due to slippage, because we didn't complete the sale of Venture House within the last financial year. Neither did we do the land swap at Bakers Lane. They are, again, likely to come forwards in this financial year. I'm pleased to report exceptional collection fund performances, both in council tax and in business rates. We are, I'm told, second in Staffordshire on both of those. And on one of them, I believe it was the council tax collection performance, we're 9th in the country in terms of collection. And so I will, on record, give my heartfelt thanks to Nikki Begley and the team. I know that Nikki is sad that we're second in Staffordshire, given that we have become accustomed to being first, but that performance is still superb. But we're doing everything that we can as well to make sure that those are smooth where they can be, and that our approach to council tax is still compassionate, even within the context of that very good performance. I'll report that we are compliant with all prudential indicators, and I'm seeking your authority this evening to make any necessary minor amendments. And of course, I will be reporting the compliance with the last year's prudential indicators to council in the fullness of time. And the other thing that I'm pleased to report is that we remain above the 90% target for the payment of suppliers within 30 days. We're tracking at 92.3, which is still below the 100% aspiration that we have. That is above the target. And again, that's largely due to extraneous factors that we genuinely cannot address in the short term. Are there any questions?
I'm sure there will be. He says, hopefully. Janice and then Phil.
Yes, however, the number of questions that I have has been seriously diminished by the fact that you've literally taken each one in turn in answering those. So with regards to the slippage, you've mentioned it's going to be in the next financial year. We appreciate the reasons why for there, especially the sale of the land, which is one of the parts that I was going to look at. The council tax successes, I think, was one to certainly be praised. The Treasury Management Index is the only thing that's still on my list that you didn't cover, but again, as a positive sign as to where we are now, and certainly in comparison to probably others who've had a much more challenging time of recent years. So really, it is more of a comment than a question still at this point to say that we've got those indicators that we know that are still looking promising for what we've done so far, and recognising that where there are slippages, we understand the mitigation as to why. So I think really it's a case of saying thank you very much for such a comprehensive report that you put through.
Thank you, Janice. I obviously can't do it without the incredible efforts of Anthony and the team, and I pay tribute to the fact that they managed to put forward such a transparent report when we bring financial reports here. Certainly, as a non-finance person myself, I find it very helpful, and I hope that I'm able to communicate it to you. On Treasury management, we're perhaps lucky that we're at that transitional point where we've been saving up for things for a little while, and we're now at the point where we can start to deploy those. But in the short term, we are having seen the benefits of that additional income, and the ratings that we have are just about as good as they can be anywhere. A minus is the minimum, but A minus is still very good in the financial environment that we're in.
Phil.
Thank you, Chair. The collection rates, as you said there, are absolutely fantastic and benchmarked against other authorities. I was just wondering, the arrears levels, so the collection rates are high, but the arrears levels also seem to be reasonably high. What is the plan? What do we look at to try and recover those arrears levels, please?
Well, we have a comprehensive program of enforcement that I won't go into in enormous detail tonight, but generally relates to tracking where things are, to discussing with people who have fallen into arrears, or with businesses that have fallen into arrears, what possible payment plans and options might be available, taking every steps that we can to avoid having to take any enforcement action, which of course is costly to us as a council, and then erodes any recoverable amounts. But we also have a policy whereby any debt that is genuinely unrecoverable goes to write-off, and we do write off very aged debts. I certainly remember seeing one recently that we wrote off a debt from 2009 that was never ever going to be recoverable. But that was dealt with. That doesn't mean that I'm sending the message that if you sit on a debt, it will go away, because we won't. But it does mean that the team are diligent where they pursue debts that are outstanding, but also compassionate where there are genuinely difficulties. And we will take every possible step to assist people to pay those debts, and assist businesses to pay those debts where they're there, because they are, after all, statutory debts. I don't know, Lizzie, whether there's anything that you want to add on that. I know that you've led on where we're dealing with things. Thank you.
To answer your question, Phil?
Supplementary, if I can,
Please do.
Thank you. Overall, in these troubled times, it's the benchmarking that we do against other authorities. We obviously have heard of local authorities that have been into financial difficulty. How do we benchmark our performance? And can you confirm that at Lichfield, you're very confident that our finances are in such a strong position?
I can certainly confirm that financially here at Lichfield, we're in a very strong position. We are perhaps blessed as a shire district that we don't have the pressures that some larger authorities have. But equally, we're not out of the woods yet. We are keeping a very close eye on things. We're aware that there are pressures, and particularly inflationary pressures when it comes to our capital projects coming forwards, that we're going to have to keep a weather eye on. But as far as Lichfield District Council is concerned, we have been historically fiscally prudent, very much so, in fact. But that has meant that we've been in a position to weather the previous storms. And hopefully, as we move out of it now, we will be emerging in a position of rude financial health, whilst also delivering the projects that people have frankly waited so long for, that we can now get on and do. Anthony?
I suppose just to add a little bit of granular detail to that. So there's things that we report to Audit Committee each year. So we took the SIP for Resilience Index last week, I think it was, which compared against all districts, our nearest neighbours, and I think of the majority of the indicators we're low risk, medium in some. There is the off-log indicators that the government have recently produced. I think we were near the median on probably all of those indicators. External audit have a specific responsibility to report on the value for money of the council. So that's financial resilience, governance, efficiency, economy, effectiveness. So they will look at what we've done, how we've done it, and give an opinion of whether they believe there's any weaknesses there. I think we only had 3 minor improvements last time. When you compare that to some other authorities locally as well as nationally that have got statutory recommendations, that's a pretty good outcome, to be honest. I suppose the only caveat I would add at the moment is we've also got a new government, and they may well make changes to some of the policies and the way money's distributed, etc. So there's an element of risk there, but I suppose for the last 6 years we've been living with that risk anyway, with 1-year funding settlements. So that's Councillor Strachan's right. I don't foresee any immediate difficulties with this council in terms of its financial resilience.
Thank you for an explanation. Thank you.
No, in which case, Rob, do you want to move to your recommendations on that paper?
Thank you. I move that we adopt recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4, and that we recommend recommendation 2.5 to full council.
Great, thank you. And all those in favour can show that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Anthony. Sticking with you, Rob, we're now on to procurement matters update 23-24.
Thank you, Leader. Hopefully much more of a high level pass on this as an update. This is the latest report, the 5th report that we brought on the health of how our procurement team is doing to Cabinet. That's been in place since 2020, and really we are now starting to reap the rewards of having a fully skilled and fully recruited procurement team. I have got to report that we have a slightly lower percentage of invoices that we've actually spent within the district. However, it still remains above benchmark, and that's perhaps something to which we don't necessarily have full control, because if somebody who we specifically need to do something is not in the district, we can't procure it from them within the district. So there's something that we can't necessarily do anything about on that one. But we are still looking very much to recruit as much as we can within Lichfield District, and you've seen on previous papers that I've brought that we are looking to wait within the district as much as we possibly can. I am delighted to report that during the last financial year, we've had no issues with compliance with the modern slavery and human trafficking statement so far as our activity. And of course, if anything does come up, we would be reporting that to council immediately. And I believe the policy says that we cease our engagement with that supplier absolutely immediately, as we properly should. What I am pleased to report, though, is that the procurement scores itself and receives scores from other departments within the council on how we're actually getting on with our procurement awareness. And what we are seeing is a consistent trend of improvement. Our approach to procurement and procuring properly is maturing, and and it is really very impressive to see how the team is now embedding it really embedding itself within all activity that we're doing as a council. We do, of course, carry out horizon scanning. There is a future procurement plan and pipeline that you will see appended to the paper. I actually need to make one amendment to that, and that is to add the revenues and benefits system procurement to it, which mysteriously got missed off the list first time. But that is a standard procurement to make sure that we've got all the software that we need to operate the revenues and benefits system. Also on the horizon scanning, though, shortly before the end of last year, the new Procurement Act received royal assent. And that really places far more of an emphasis on social value within procurement, which is something that members of the Labour group and myself have been talking about for certainly the last 2 or 3 years. I'm delighted to see that's now in statute, and it's something that we will have to pay far closer attention to and really make sure that we address it as we come forwards in our future contracts. And so that's something that it's a watch this space. Watch how that becomes embedded now. It is already there in the stock procurement pro forma, but it's likely to be rising to the top. Anthony, is there anything that you'd like to add at this stage?
I'm just going to say a couple of things. So in an anticipation of the changes with social value and the fact it was already in the procurement strategy, we've recently recruited a social value coordinator post to add capacity into that team. And that's quite important, because the point Councillor Strachan makes about the percentage of spend in Lichfield District going down is factual. And it is also factual that a number of the procurements that we do are large in scale, and they can distort that number from year to year. But the value, let's take the leisure centre as an example. That's likely to be a contractor that's located out of Lichfield District, but the advantage of having a social value policy and coordinator is we can lever out of that contract value for the local area. So that might be use of local suppliers, apprentices, school visits, those type of things. So whilst we're not directly spending the money with a supplier in the area, the area benefits from it. So that capacity will enable that to increase. And we just recently procured a piece of software which will allow us to monetize the value of that social value, to give you an indication of what the economic value is to the district.
Thank you, Anthony. I knew there was something I'd forgotten. Are there any questions?
Janice, over to you.
Thank you very much. Just to finish on pick up that last point on there, I suddenly found myself of late paying particular attention to when the reports come through to the environmental impact, including climate change and biodiversity. I don't know why. But it was really useful to be able to see the content that you've put through into those and the social value policy and how you can actually monetize it. That is going to be an impressive piece of kit, which I wouldn't mind actually seeing in more detail myself separately. But, I think that's worthwhile just acknowledging that information that's been put through. My question specifically on this one is to do with Appendix B, the Local Government Association National Procurement Strategy Maturity Assessment. Just to see how that actually fits in, if you could give us a bit of context, I think that would be helpful for me. It clearly looks like an improving situation over time. Some of those headings to me aren't static. That it's a movable feast, I think, in some cases. So how you can measure 1 year compared to another, I think would also be quite tricky. But I'd just be interested to see how that information's utilised, how that assessment is developed potentially as well.
I'm definitely going to let the man who owns that document give you the answer on there.
So when we introduced the procurement strategy back in 2020, one of the first things we did was compare the procurement team, or the procurement approach as it was at that time, to that strategy. And at the time, that was the first time we'd employed an in-house procurement team of 2 individuals. We hadn't had a strategy. It was a very decentralized, laissez-faire approach. So you can probably see back in 2021, we were very low, 1s, 2s on everything at that point in time. But I think that gave us a good starting point to say, well, this is going to take a little bit of time to get this to move forward. So the first procurement manager we had put in place the bedrock of all the processes, procedures, etc. we needed to move forward. So, and it is a self-assessment. To be honest, procurement managers are probably harder on themselves than an external assessor would be. But the aim of doing this each year is to give a direction of travel as to how the procurement team are improving compared to this strategy. So you can see that not in all cases, but it's moving from 1s, 2s up to 3s, 4s. And I think Sarah's mentioning there she would like to be a leader in some areas, especially social value and things like that, because that's Sarah's particular passion. So hopefully this demonstrates that we are improving, but you could see even after 4 years, contract relationship management, social value, we were pretty static. So that's why we've introduced the social value coordinator. And, you know, I'm more than happy for you to meet Jared. I mean, he's an incredibly passionate guy about this. He came to leadership team recently with a presentation, and that passion comes through. He would be more than willing to show you what he's doing and the system he's procured. So that will enable us to measure the impact in a economic sense of the work he's doing.
I think, Janice, to add to what Anthony's just said on that, neither of us are presenting this paper tonight as job done. This is something that's always going to be under constant review, thematic review, year on year on year. And there are some things that we still know that we need to have a proper look at. Some of the things around contract management, around post-contract reviews, around engaging with enterprises around the business. Now, there are some things that the pieces are starting to fall into place with the framework that we approved recently, which hopefully will bring far more local suppliers on board with DFGs, as Anthony just mentioned. The other element of that social value role is going to be a contracts management role. And I think there's going to be a very important piece of work to do there with how we manage those and how we make sure that those contracts are all heading in the right direction. And we are managing the relationships with people who want to work with us and who already do work with us. So that is an emergent piece of work. And I hope that we'll be able to see that those ones that are in this year's column will be starting to move into 2s and 3s as we come towards the next 2 or 3 years.
Come back briefly just to say as well, it is that fact that it is a moving feast, you know, that the headings that you've got there in the environment that we're operating in are constantly changing as well. So I think it's how you're still being able to maintain that level of improvement and development, acknowledging those and continuing to do so when they're not stationary themselves. Good.
No,
Thank
this
you.
is a living document within a living economy, and that's how it must be read.
Right, thank you. Any more, Richard?
Thank you, Chair. I'm encouraged regards to the suppliers paid within 30 days. I think it's really a way forward, and to see that as an increase on the baseline figure is always encouraging, because we are wanting to achieve the best. But I will always counter argue that we also still have to deliver as an authority best value, and to ensure that we are getting the best for our money. And so it is a delicate balance. I'm sure that to reach one, as long as it doesn't compromise the other, that we actually aren't revolving around best value and best practice. But it is good in terms of the paid in line with the social value objectives. I absolutely compliment where we're going with that. But I just always, as always, I've said it before, probably will always say this one again, but we are have a responsibility of best value as well. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Some very good work there, Councillor Strachan. I can see that in the team. Having been involved previously in a previous life in procurement, I realise how difficult it can be in trying to achieve the right balance with everything that you're looking to do. One of the areas I was pleased that you commented on was the work that you're going to do as far as once the contract has been awarded, to ensure that there is follow-up with that, with a case manager or someone actually managing the relationship with that supplier, rather than an award being made for the goods, let's say, and then we don't sort of follow it up. So I think that's absolutely pleasing to do that. It's really a good thing to do. And overall, the other questions that have been raised have ticked off my list as well. So it gets a thumbs up from me. Thank you.
Great. Let's move to the recommendations.
Well, I move recommendations 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3.
Great. All indicate in favour. Yeah, that is unanimous. Thank you very much, Rob and Anthony, once again. Sticking with you, the final paper that you've got to deliver tonight is the MTFS.
Thank you, Leader. Again, reasonably high level, because this is the first in a long road of the medium-term financial strategy, which eventually lurches its unsteady route to council on the 25th of February next year. And so this is the first stop along the road, and what we're looking to do at this point is to start that refresh and start to set out the form, the timetable, how it's going to look, and to agree the fundamental principles that will underpin that budget. And so I don't propose to speak to those in any great depth. They're on the papers in front of you, and hopefully you'll be able to go with it. What I do need to touch on is a couple of recommendations where we will be updating the capital programme going forwards. And those are the increase of the project budget for the 3G pitch in Lichfield, which is going from 400 to 800,000, and that we will update the medium-term financial strategy to implement food waste collection, and that's 1.76 million updates to the MTFS, which fortunately is funded by the government's New Burdens grant under Section 31, and that is shared between ourselves and Tamworth. Although, of course, as the holders of the Joint Waste Service, that will be coming to us and will then be shared out between the two authorities. Are there any questions?
I'm sure there will be. One from me then, just to before we get right into it. The we have an inevitable degree of risk as we work through the budget setting process between now and February next year. There will no doubt be, we're seeing a fairly aggressive legislative agenda come through from the government, and no doubt that will affect virtually all areas of the district council. Do we have any particular concerns in terms of budget setting in particular areas where we think it might be more difficult to get levels of certainty between now and February than others?
I think the small matter of the budget that's coming in autumn is likely to be fundamentally determinative of where we are and where we're going and how we look. The statement yesterday was a little troubling on the efficiencies that are being required across a number of government departments, and the Department for Housing, Communities and Local Government is certainly not going to be spared any of that. But the short answer, I think, is at this stage we don't have a lot of detail. I would expect that it will be briefed in the fullness of time. But I am going to be bringing a number of these papers to Cabinet, to scrutiny, to audit, and then eventually to Council. And I look forward to giving you a blow-by-blow account as we get it. Anthony, I know that you've sent me some briefing papers. I don't know whether you have any early intelligence.
No, so, I mean, one that came out yesterday, which I think was in the government's manifesto, was around adding VAT to private school tuition fees. What also came out yesterday was the removal of business rate reliefs to private schools. Now, I think there will be a financial benefit to this council, because I believe we do award 80% relief to some schools in this area. So I suspect there is going to be some pluses and minuses through this process, and hopefully they all balance each other out, or we gain from it. But Councillor Strachan's right. Until we get some detail, it's very difficult to make judgments. Some of the headline announcements, like multi-year settlements, well, we've been asking for that for years. The consolidation of funding pots into the mainstream funding, again, we've been asking for that. how that's distributed is going to be the key for this council. And we're not going to get into that, probably the budget bit later than that, to be honest. My suspicion is we're going to get almost a rollover settlement for the first year that takes us to the spending review next spring, I think it is. That's when the real fundamental change may come in, because there'll be then a 3-year settlement that comes out of that.
So in terms of setting budget in February, fine, but expect fun and games in spring when things really do come out.
Potentially. If I can touch very briefly on the business rates impact, because I will admit the business rates relief removal for those private schools. So I will admit that was a little bit of a surprise. Where that risks threatening the viability of schools, I would certainly like to see this council stand at the forefront, because those schools in this district serve a challenged sector and serve a very valuable role in society, and any risk to their existential health gives me grave concern.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go to Alec.
Thank you. I just want to give Councillor Strachan great plaudits in the efforts that this goes to help those suffering from homelessness. I think, you know, anybody who has experienced homelessness will agree it's a really traumatic time, and the fact that this council steps up to the plate and goes above and beyond the levels that it's required to do in order to help those suffering from homelessness, and also alongside the fantastic work of Anne and the team here that really look after people and really care about what they do. I just think I'd like to say thank you to Councillor Strachan and also the whole team and everything that we do here as a council for those suffering homelessness. And of course, homelessness isn't just things that you see on the street. We're not talking about rough sleeping. We're talking about people that have suffered from domestic violence. They've got financial issues, family issues, and it's just so pleasing to see that we do so well as a council to look after those people. Thank you.
Thank you for the plaudits. I cannot accept them. This is not due to my efforts. This is due to the efforts of a cadre of absolutely excellent local government officers, and to whose efforts I pay tribute tonight.
Thank you. Any more, Janice?
Again, thank you for the first of 9, I think it is, when we start going through the process. And I think that needs to be acknowledged in itself, because that level of openness and the sharing of the information, I think, is important for what we need to do. But equally, the environment that we're operating in makes it even more important that we need to make sure we've got that attention to detail. A number of which you've already mentioned, but on page 92, we have got some information there for the IT spend that I think might just be worthwhile bringing to the attention for Cabinet tonight. Others, I think you've already put into context. And then the next part in there, we've got the budget consultation, and we've got the time frame for that as well. So I think we've got a lot of detail, and just making sure that anybody who might be watching this evening has opportunity to also be able to comment.
Yep, certainly. You can see within the appendices, you've also got the budget consultation proposal that Tracy Cross has put together. We never get as many responses to the budget consultation as I would like, and so making that as accessible and as interesting as we possibly can within the context of local government finances is something that's really key to the success of this consultation. Because yes, it's something that legally we must do. We must carry out a consultation across the district on our budget. But I think it's incumbent on us as an authority to make it as easy as possible and as interesting as possible for people to really manage to get their teeth into what it is that we're doing. On the issues around IT spend, I am going to defer to Anthony and see whether there's any meat that he can put on the bones in that one.
So probably all I'd probably add to it is that we've got a number of capital budgets what I class as business as usual type. So IT is one of those, property maintenance is another. They're things we have to do irrespective of the direction of travel the council's taking. We make an assessment, or we've made an assessment of a realistic and affordable amount we set aside. You know, there's just shy of £1 million there. But IT and digital is critical. You know, if you go to the audit committee regularly, one of the 7 strategic risks is cyber, and we get more and more questions at the audit committee around that. So it's a false economy not to invest in IT and its infrastructure, in my opinion, both from a cyber security side, but from an enabling digital alternative engagement approach for the council. That's the direction of travel. So, you know, we have to invest in it. And as I say, it's a false economy not to, in my opinion.
You preempted my next question, which was the cyber element to it. I don't know if any of my colleagues have just had their reminder to renew their certification for what we also need to do for cyber security, and I would have been anticipating that that would be a fundamental part.
Thanks, Dennis. I'm going to go to Bill.
Thank you, Chair. Page 90, Councillor Strachan, just looking at the assumption of business properties, which seems to be stagnating at about 3,000. And doesn't that really highlight the importance of the council's plans for city centre development, growth in business opportunities that can generate wealth and generate opportunities? I'd just like you, if you could, just to comment on that apparent stagnation and what the city centre redevelopment, as I've just outlined, might do to change those figures.
Yeah, I'll hop in and then Anthony can correct me if I do misstep. It's a product of the fact that we never put any numbers into our financial statements until we're sure of those numbers. And so those the number of business properties is likely to change with the adoption of the emergent local plan, Councillor Farrell. But until we know what that's going to look like, we don't put it in the numbers. So that's why that looks how it does. Anthony, is that?
I'm just going to add one other thing to what Councillor Strachan said. This question came up at Overview Scrutiny last year. So it does look static, and you're right on the numbers. We do build increases in, but we do have demolitions, as you can see at the moment. So that takes properties out. We also increasingly having mergers and conversions. So part of the approach has been to convert business premise to residential. That means we're taking money out of the business rates pot, and it adds to the council tax pot. So it does look a static number, but there is movement in there, within there. Some of that is government policy related in the planning arena. So, and Councillor Strachan is right, the local plan will ultimately dictate how that grows in the coming years.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Any more? Yep, Richard.
Yeah, I take your comment on the consultation, and obviously, you know, 3 years of doing it and really disappointing numbers responding, where after year one and in year two look good-ish, and then we slip again. And obviously it is trying to find that right measure of how we actually reach out to residents for them to be, you know, in terms of something that we have to do, that they understand what we have to do and actually they have an input. And I'm wondering, have we actually explored all the best ways of possibly reaching out to our communities? It is obviously a bit like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And I get that, but I think it's also very important to know that we've done our very best to really rise to the challenges to get those numbers increased. Because the more you get, the better we actually understand what our district is looking for. A small percentage of people doesn't really represent the direction we could be going, and I think it's important that we somehow try and get that right going forward. But I appreciate, you know, I say it and I will always say it, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink it.
Indeed.
I think I'd agree with Councillor Cox on the fact that the new or 3 years ago, the new route with the sliders about where a consultee would like to commit spend and the possible impacts that might have in the context of the wider budget and in the context of wider policy was excellent, and we got radically improved response rates in the first 2 years. I wonder whether last year's was just a little bit too long, because we did see an uptick in the number of people who started the consultation and never actually finished it, and so that could be a product of that. This evening, I am, of course, seeking a delegation to look at the form of that consultation and how we can better reach sectors in the community that we found it difficult to reach. Certainly the under 30s, school age children, who of course are consultees because they are users of facilities around the area. Certainly we need to find better ways to reach them. I don't know whether Councillor Cox, in his capacity as community engagement cabinet member, would like to join me in some social media influence and stuff. I'm sure that we could cook something up together, Richard. But yeah, I think the form of how we reach and approach and engage with people who live in the district of all ages is going to need to be something that we'll have a proper look at as we come forward. And I would expect it would play a key role in that consultation.
But
Please do.
I'd be delighted to take that up because obviously it is about engaging with our communities, and I do carry that portfolio responsibility. So if there's anything I can do and contribute, I'm absolutely sure that it's the way forward. Thank you.
Great. We'll talk to Tracy. We'll do something. Cheers, Rich.
Great. Thank you. Rob, do you want to move to your recommendations?
I would be delighted to move recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4 standing in my name.
Thank you, Rob. Was in favour, indicate that is unanimous again. Thank you very much, Rob and okay, you'll be pleased to know that brings us to the end of Councillor Strachan's papers for this evening. Next item on the agenda is one which I know we'll all be very excited about, the Civic Matrix, and this is to review the recommendations that have come from the overview and scrutiny, who set up a task group specifically to look at this issue. I'm sure you've all read the paper. There's the recommendations at 2, where there are a number of recommendations. There is a background section, and also there are appendices, both the task group report and letters that were submitted to that task group, all included in the appendix there. The high-level executive summary of this is that the Civic Matrix wasn't working. The task group went away to look at how it might be improved and to have come up with the recommendations which you find at 2.1. They are there for our discussion and for us to approve or not. So I will open the floor for to start discussing. Or ask questions. I can answer questions. I'm as chair of M&S, but I'm sure I can help. Where am I going to start? I'm going to start with Richard Cox, because I know he'll have plenty to say on this.
Yeah, I think this, in a way, is a report that shows, in a way, that scrutiny has a serious role within the authority. But I'm just wondering whether we're not really addressing the problem that we have from the matrix to a scoring system. And I'm not too sure that it's actually going to take us forward in any way. I believe for me, the matrix was introduced when we were trying to deal with fit for the future. Cuts were happening everywhere, etc., and it was a way of curtailing actually what cost does the chair and vice chair have to the authority. And then obviously, and I made reference to it previously, of best value. I don't think we're at that juncture any longer. And that's why I probably think the matrix actually is no longer working, and effectively that is no longer fit for purpose. So I think it was right and proper that the scrutiny took time to evaluate it, but I'm just concerned that the outcome actually leads us possibly down the same route, that actually we're not getting really what the chair, in my mind, is responsible and represents the district as a whole. I clearly feel that the chair is the first citizen and represents us, and I know that the chairs do that, very much so. In the long time I've been here, I only recall one chair that literally took every invitation up and went along to everything that was going, and then obviously there was a considerable cost, but I still think there is value about our chairs being seen and representing the district. And certainly in the latter few years, I certainly saw, like, with no disrespect to the
Let's not
the-
name names.
no, I'm not. The absence of the district council chairman, and yet we seem to have throughout the district representatives from other third tier authorities seem to be taking the precedence in terms of the invites. And I thought, well, I'm going to ask a few questions. Why is that the case? And the case was, well, we don't think that Lichfield District want to send their chairman anywhere anymore. Now, I don't think that was ever the intention. For 1 minute, I don't believe it was ever the intention. But I do think there's a responsibility with the role. Now, if you look at the scoring system, I am concerned that we could be excluding a key part of what was not then, because we didn't have it, but we do have a community power strategy. And I think it's important that if we have got that strategy, it's clear that our lead ambassador, or whatever you want to go, that represents this district is free to go to within the district without having to try and go through a scoring system. And because if you're not careful, then that scoring system might exclude. Now, I know that it said then that actually the chair could still go, but wouldn't be effectively represent the district council chain or not. Now, I think that is, if they're going to be there, they're going to be there, and they should be very much representing the community. So I'm just not entirely, I agree that we've gone through the process, but I just don't think it's necessarily, in terms of the community value of it, I think we could find ourselves being curtailed and not supporting a key strategy of this council. And I would like it to possibly just be working with the chair and the vice and the civic support officer to make the right decisions, knowing that we've gone through a system, and I'm sure their consciences will deliver the right direction for them. So I'm not 100% behind it, but I do value the work that's been done to get here. But I leave it at that.
Yeah,
Thank you,
okay.
Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Let's just bring some of the people on ring. Alex from Janesville. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to be slightly less diplomatic than Councillor Cox. I'm not a fan of this report, but I am a fan of the fact that we've gone through the process, and I've got lots of respect for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. But often you can get to a situation where you're scrutinising something or coming up with a system that I just don't think is needed. What's the phrase? A camel is a committee-made horse. And I think in this instance, I would agree with that. I'm just going through all of the recommendations and all the background again. And I'm being taken back to my A-level maths days to try and work out if a chair can appear or not at certain events. And surely it's of the opinion and direction of the chair, which may I remind councillors that we as a group of a council elect to that position to make their own decisions on where they should go and where they shouldn't go. Yes, there's an argument to say that maybe the chair could sometimes overreach and go to some areas that the chair shouldn't be going to, but that's why we have a facility in full council to ask the chair questions. And if we don't believe that the chair has gone to the correct places, the full council can ask that question. And I believe that the chair should report back to full council where they're going on behalf of Lichfield District. Now, the chair can choose to go to a different borough or a different district to represent Lichfield, and that may be appropriate. And they can and should choose to visit groups and events within the district. But I don't believe they should have to look down at a spreadsheet before they do so. You get out of this role as a councillor and as a chair what you put into it. Some chairs are more active than others, and there are a variety of reasons for that. I just don't believe all of these words and these matrices are needed. And I'm quite interested on the first point on 3.2. It said members unanimously agreed that a points-based system for determining events was preferable to the existing matrix. That could be true, but I don't believe either option is preferable to me, a points-based system or a matrix. Just believe the chair should make their own decisions and the council should judge those chairs' decisions accordingly. I think I'll probably leave it there for now.
Okay, thanks, Alex. That's what Janice and Phil indicate.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I read the content of this with great interest, and even more so the letters that had been put through by those, including very recent holders of the seat as well. And the conclusion that I came away with is that, are we overcomplicating something? I think there's often a danger, especially when in other contexts, when you're legislating for things, and I appreciate this is a matrix, not that, but there is that opportunity to make things so complicated that you could tie yourself up in knots, being able to determine what it is you can and you cannot do. But equally, I think there is also the risk that you might actually prevent opportunities by having this particular grid. And I looked at one of the comments was that they were not sure of the value of any complicated process of assessment, and I think that was my takeaway line from somebody who has been doing this role in particular. So that I thought was a useful element to it. The rest of the report, again, with my sort of need at the moment to keep on looking at information that's put through, we got climate change not applicable, crime and safety issues not applicable, equality, diversity, human rights not applicable. And I did think, well, actually, that was probably more of an opportunity where it would be, as opposed to not in the report as well. So I've come away with a few more questions with regards to that element to it. But at the moment, I think that my takeaway, my conclusion would be that how sure am I in the value of any of this complicated process of assessment? And the answer would be not very.
Thank you, Janice. Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Like Janice, I also read the detail of the 3 past chairs and 1 current chair. And to me, the theme that was coming through here was the benefits that can be obtained from the civic role. And it felt, certainly from the 3 past chairs, that they wanted the opportunity to go out and generate business growth, relationships, and the matrix as is, and the one that will be proposed, certainly didn't go down well with those 3 past chairs. Even the current chair used words like invidious in her assessment of the proposed scheme. So consequently, I think we should concentrate on the benefits of what this role can offer. It does need accountability, as all does, and transparency. And I think we've heard tonight that the suggestions that the chair can report back to full council, questions can be asked. So I think there's enough controls and transparency in place, and lets the chair and vice chair use common sense between them to try and gain as much benefit for this district as possible from their activities. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Rob, complete the set.
Thank you, Leader. I think it will surprise nobody that I share the views of most of my colleagues. I feel particularly guilty about this because the original matrix was born of the then Strategic Overview and Scrutiny Committee, of which I was chair, and was put in place very much to address the worst excesses of a couple of previous chairs of this authority. If this process, and I do want to offer thanks to the task group members, because if it's demonstrated one thing to me, it's that you can really radically overcomplicate something that doesn't really need to be overcomplicated if a little bit of discretion is applied. And I think that certainly we've reached the point at which we have radically overcomplicated something, and the chair's discretion will be better deployed. I think the worst situation was that if I thought about it briefly, as a local member, I can go and attend a village show in Longdon if I want to, and go and speak, and nothing shackles or fetters me or prevents me from doing that. But yet the chair of this authority would be prevented from doing so by this authority, because that would definitely be a one scoring thing. It's probably the only position within this authority that is subject to such strict and rigid constraints. And I think reading the input from people who have actually done the role, it is unwelcome, constricting, and actually hinders Lichfield when we're seeking to send ambassadors to events. And so I think it was fit for purpose once. It is probably no longer fit for purpose. And certainly I think a move away from the current civic matrix would be very welcome if such alternative proposal were found.
Okay, thank you, Rob. I'm going to try and summarise all of those different points now and try and put them together in a coherent form of recommendation that hopefully we can get behind. I think what we're hearing is that actually getting rid of the matrix doesn't go far enough, and we need to get rid of all point scoring system and allow it or leave it to the discretion of the chair. I think my own personal view is that the biggest issue in the past was not having some sort of control over the events they went to, but the lack of transparency over which events they actually went to. So they say sunlight is the best disinfectant, and I actually think I really stand behind that. I think the suggestion of having the chair give a report of where they've been over since the previous full council actually allows that full transparency over where they're choosing to go and where they're choosing to spend their budget. Their budget, which I think we ought to point out, is fixed over the year. Previously, the allowance that was made for clothing was kind of all thrown into the same pot. I don't think that's helpful, because it leaves the obvious opportunity for somebody to then blow the entire budget on a Gucci shirt and then not turn up to any events and yet somehow still fall within the policy of the council, which is slightly absurd. So I'll touch on that because that falls under one of the recommendations. So trust and accountability is what we talk about time and time again in this organisation. Let's trust the chair to do their job properly, and let's ensure they're accountable to full council through transparency, I think, is what we're asking. What I'm going to suggest then, and bear with me, and I will circulate this to officers to make sure we capture this. What I'm going to suggest is that we thank the task group and ONS for the work put into this, that we don't accept points or recommendations A through to E. So we reject recommendations A to E, which are around the scoring. We accept recommendations F, G, H, and I. And I can go through my rationale on that, or we're happy to have a debate about that. But then also add in a recommendation which says that having reviewed the operation of the matrix, Cabinet recommends the requirement for a civic matrix be withdrawn, with the decisions on event invitations now to be determined by the chair and vice chair. And that we also add for the transparency requirement that for transparency and accountability, Cabinet recommends that the chair include a record of all the events the chair and vice chair have attended since last full council within their chair's announcements at the beginning of the council. So I'm just talking through my rationale. So F, recommendation F there, that no determination of events required input from the leader or chief executive as exists in the current matrix. I was always inherently uncomfortable that I was being approached by civic officers, or the chair actually, to ask if they could go to an event totally sits outside of my purview as political leader. absolutely sits with them as chair or vice chair to make their own decision. And I think that I think it puts us in a very awkward position. G is I think is fairly straightforward. H, the rationale behind amalgamating those budgets is so that we don't end up with the chair's got no money to go to anything at the end of the year, but the vice chair hasn't spent a penny. And the reality is that the vice chair and the chair are operating broadly similarly together, so it makes sense to put their budgets together. And point I there about the maximum appropriate level for clothing for £200, that's to fall within the existing budget, fixed budget that the civic heads have, chair and vice chair, but just means that they can't choose to go and buy that Gucci shirt. Well, they won't be able to buy one with £200. I don't know what a Gucci shirt is, but again, I think we should make it really clear that is there if they need to attend events that require certain parts of clothing, etc. Should certainly not be the expectation that it just gets spent regardless of the circumstances. But clearly, we wouldn't want to prevent anybody being the chair or vice chair who didn't have the appropriate clothing for some of the events they might want to go to. And just for clarity, I think the recommendation there is that's £200 per person, so for chair and vice chair. So we're going to reject A through E. We're going to accept F through I inclusive and add in the two recommendations which I touched on earlier. One is that we withdraw the civic matrix as it exists today, and secondly that we recommend to the chair that they notify council of the events they've been to in a standard report. I'd highly recommend that's a written report circulated to full council rather than going through every single event verbally at the beginning of council. Please. Any further debate required on that? What I've just put forward, or are we? Janice, go.
Yeah, just to add that because you made the comment as well about that £200 per person. So just in the roundup there, just to make sure that's clear as well for those. But no, I think the transparency element in particular, I think, is what was actually missing, and I think that it would be useful as a written report.
Great, thanks, Janice. No further questions, in which case I'm going to move the recommendations that I've just made. I will circulate those in writing to officers just so we've got an accurate capture of that to go to council with. All those in favour? Great, thank you. That's unanimous. Right, on to the next item, which is Staffordshire Leaders Board terms of reference. The Staffordshire Leaders Board was established quite a while ago now, well over a year ago, and it's intended to pull together the leaders of the 8 district and borough councils. Oh, sorry, pull together, the 8 district, borough and councils, as well as the county council, to work together on key strategic priorities across the county. Since a change in political leadership at Stoke-on-Trent City Council, they have now requested that they formally join the Leaders Board as a constituent member, and this paper is purely to update the terms of reference of the board for your approval. Those terms of reference, part of the constitution of the Leaders Board requires them to go out to each council before then going back to the Leaders Board. So we're looking for the term of reference updates contained at 3.4 and 3.5 in the document. Happy to take any questions. Richard.
Thanks, Chair. I personally see that letting Stoke-on-Trent around the table is a good thing. I don't see it as a bad thing. I think it's a unitary authority, but its geographical sense is Staffordshire, and I think there's a lot that we can gain from it. So I'm more than happy with regards to the process of the leadership board. So I think that's really all we can say at this stage in terms of setting out the new governance.
Oh, great. Thanks, Richard. It's a fairly mundane piece of bureaucracy, to be frank. Any more questions, Janice?
Not a question, as a comment. Again, I see it as an opportunity for a strengthening process. And so, on the basis of what we've got here, accepting those, no problem.
Great, thank you. In which case, let's go to the recommendation, which is that we note and we need to agree to it, so we do need to vote for it. If we can indicate. Great, thank you. That is unanimous. Right, on to the next item. Councillor Whitehouse, with you for the Joint Waste Service Fleet Procurement. I'll just remind everyone that we do have a paper, an appendix, which is in confidential. If you do have questions related to that, please try and keep it to the end so that we can take them all together in confidential at the end. Otherwise, we'll end up having to move straight into confidential. Let's try and keep as much of this in public as possible. Phil, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This paper is fairly straightforward in most of the content. What we are trying to achieve here is the replacement of the fleet, the waste fleet. The current contract expires on the 31st of March, and behind the scenes, the team have been putting together a comprehensive matrix and process to look at various suppliers, potential suppliers of the new fleet. This, remember, is in the budget of 11.5 million. And so their key aim is to try and make sure that whatever work they come up with is maintained within that budget. The matrix that we talked about is confidential, but it is attached to the papers. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at the thorough detail that the team have been into to reach the stage that we have. And Lizzie is here with me to give any further background and help me with any questions that you might have on that side. So this paper is seeking to delegate the award of the contract to the preferred bidder to be given to myself as Cabinet Member for Operational Services, Parks and Waste, and also the Director for Resident and Business Services, Lizzie Barton, and Director of Finance, Regulation and Enforcement, Anthony. There are recommendations in here where things can be noted. They are within items 2.2 to 2.5. And the key part that I am seeking tonight authority for is recommendation 2.1, which I've just read out. And happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Whitehouse, for your inaugural appearance at Cabinet, delivering a paper. Did I see a hand go up over here? Janice.
Yeah, just acknowledging the fact that it is a significant investment that we can see here being presented. In terms of the flexibility in the vehicles, I'm seeing that there is an element of that. So there is some sort of future proofing in effect as well. But I think it might be worthwhile just making that point particularly clear. The only part that I'm sort of looking at and questioning, and I'm hoping that it's okay in this particular element. And when we start looking at some of the ratings that we've got on page 144, we've got item G, which is red and severe. And is that something there that we can explore at this point? I'm hoping so. It does look at the potential for delay and how that might have, I would assume, quite a profound impact. Having started this point by saying this is a significant development, investment.
Both. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question there, Janice. The service that we're operating is the joint waste agreement, of course, with Tamworth. and therefore, as our partners in this, we're heavily reliant on their process, their speed of getting things through the decision-making process. And because Tamworth has recently changed hands as well, there has been a further sort of delay to what we would normally have expected. So consequently, next week on Monday, we are talking to the overview and scrutiny team and giving a member briefing on the Joint Waste Service. It would appear that some of their councillors are not quite sure how it works, and we're trying to give some background to all of that. And then consequently, it goes to their is it cabinet or council? It goes to cabinet on the 8th. Now, the flexibility that you've talked about is that we have negotiated with the preferred supplier, and we have informed them and kept them informed of potentially slight delays in being able to make the decision on procurement. So there is obviously a risk, because we're dealing with a third party, that things might not move to the pace that we would want them to. But we are assured as best as we can from the people that we've been speaking to that things are in hand, and therefore we're waiting anxiously for next week to get the agreement actually sorted out and signed off by Tamworth. Hopefully that answers that point.
Thank you. Any more? We've done half an hour on the civic matrix. We could we'll follow the law of local government. Richard.
Wouldn't be the same without me making comment. I think this is a big investment, but it's investment by the one I would probably think service that we provide to our residents that is the most important. So it really covers to me in terms of getting it right. And I think that I'm happy with the response that Janice Sylvester Hall received in the view of the flexibility in the vehicles, because obviously it's a question as time goes on. It's about moving away from fossil fuel to obviously battery, but we have to currently look at what we've got today and the geographical size of the district, and I'm sure technology will certainly be coming along that will eventually provide us with those vehicles. And it looks to me is that you've covered the basis there, because it means having that flexibility means that there is a chance of introducing vehicles rather than not being able to, if I've got that right, if that's my understanding, that we can introduce vehicles as we go going along. Could you confirm that?
Yes, we can do that. It also in the 2.3 section tells us that these particular vehicles can be run on hydro-treated vegetable oil, subject to the right decision when the market prices are right to do that. So that covers Janice's point as well. And also the contract from the outset has been made clear that we want to build in the flexibility that should we have capacity for alternative fuels such as electric, then we can, subject to contract variation, of course, we can revisit that and look at the amount of vehicles that we would need. That will involve a major project, of course, at the depot and lots of other implications. But the flexibility that we have built in for the next 7 years gives us that chance to look at these things at the appropriate time. Today is not the appropriate time, tomorrow may be, but it certainly gives us the flexibility to sort that out.
Thank you.
With that, brilliant. I've got some questions about the actual procurement ratings, etc. So I want to save those for afterwards, if that's okay, rather than me risk asking stuff in public that I shouldn't ask. Has anyone got any questions whilst we're still in public. Janice, do you want to go now?
It was just to say that I too want questions in confidential. So yeah, if we could do that, please.
Okay, brilliant. In which case, exclusion of press and public. Resolved that as publicity would be prejudicial to the public interest by reason of the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, which would involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972.